service. And over to Viva for the drosha. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Thanks. Well, it always amazes me how each Shabbat, the Torah service and the parasha, has something to say which is so personal to me, and I trust to each and every one of you. In this week's parasha, you heard me read that Moses reaches his lowest ebb. And I know there are many of us today who feel we've also perhaps reached our lowest ebb. Here the people you heard, they were complaining about food, and it wasn't as though they were hungry. I think they were merely just bored, fed up. Why do people complain? Why do we complain? Why do we always see what is wrong and not what is right? I do it, we all do it. And I think it's perhaps because we condition, the new word is socialized, to listen to other people. We hear the wrong people, we with the wrong people, we hear people complaining, so we complain. But how many of you have reached the depths of despair where, like Moses, he didn't feel like living anymore? He just lost his confidence. He was depressed. He was miserable and fed up. Now, it's interesting that Hashem doesn't say to him, come on, man, cheer up, pull yourself together, because that's the worst thing you could say. Instead, Hashem tells him to gather people around him who would help him with a burden. And the people around him, give them something practical to do. Now, Hashem then speaks to Moses as a friend. And this is something very peculiar and particular to the Jewish religion. So he gathered the 70 people around him. And it was as though Hashem was saying to Moses, don't try and handle this burden on your own. There are people who are not complaining, perhaps amongst those closest to you or the leadership. Gather them around you, because prophets, and in Judaism, our greatest prophets of all, Moses, David, Joshua, and others, were still human beings, and they felt human emotions. And this is something very, very important. And God, in this parasha, reminds us that if great prophets can still be human, we are human too. And we must understand and how to deal with these human emotions of depression, of loneliness, of fear, of feeling we're not good enough, of feeling we've failed in some aspect. We are actually social animals, and we all know that. By the way, that is the basis of the Jewish religion having a minyan, always having at least 10 people. Christianity, to a certain extent, followed that when it said 2 or more gathered in my name. And so, of course, did Islam, all three religions coming out of the Abrahamic religions. But this is why we are told to be 10 together, because we need each other. We can do very little on our own. And if that applied to our greatest prophet, the only prophet who has actually seen the back and communicated with Hashem directly, how much more does it apply to us? So God himself speaks to Moses as a friend. This is the basis where Judaism is such a unique religion. God is not merely some great, magnificent creator, holier up there, something that we're scared of or that we cannot reach. So he is a close, tender, loving father. As we say, what do we say, Marion? Malvinu Malkenu, my father. So he is like a parent, the same as a parent would comfort a child. And so he comforts Moses. And this is always very important. And as you hear, we read every Shabbat morning, that God is close to all who call upon him in sincerity. He is not just a supreme power. And this is what Moses discovered, and this is what you and I must discover now. In any area that we feel we're lacking, depressed, or have been left alone through the loss of a loved one. Judaism understands that solitary confinement is the worst punishment in the world. Why? Why is that worse than even physical torture? Because you and I were created not to be alone. We need each other. We need each other in our family circles. We need each other in this congregation. That is why each of us are here today. We need each other in our country, in humanity. We've got to seek out the right people who will encourage us to have faith, as Hashem encourages Moses now. Don't worry, it's going to be all right. You are going through tough times, but we need each other. I cannot do it on my own without you. Marion, Jacob, and I could not do the service unless you were attending. Everyone is equally important. No one is more important than the other because we need each other. And this is the great lesson in this parasha today and how Hashem speaks to Moses. Now, something I also have discovered, it's very, very interesting, that it's terribly important, the friends you choose to be with. I better not say the congregation you choose to be with, because Baruch Hashem, every congregation is good. But I know from my psychology background, that if you are surrounded by people who are thinking negatively, who are miserable, who are complaining, who are moaning, or who resent authority, you're going to become like them. And the great lesson from our Torah is the one about Korach. Do you remember the Korach rebellion when Moses' two sons? Am I right, Jacob, Marion? Let's have input from you. The Torah rebellion, when they decided they were better than Moses, and they went into the inner sanctum with a strange incense and a strange fire, and they were devoured by fire, and they were killed, and many people were killed with them. And what the sages think and the psychologists think, the Korach rebellion was because Korach and the people and the person with him, they were encamped near one another. And so they all began to talk against Moses and his leadership and Aaron. And so the sages concluded, woe to the wicked and woe to their neighbor. Now, I haven't ever seen that before. And I discovered in doing research for today that Korach, that whole rebellion, was because the camp and the people next to them started to complain and moan against Moses and thought that they could do better. As in the opposite direction, the people who stood with Moses, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, were encamped near Moses and Aaron, and they became distinguished. They became more like Moses and more like Aaron. And hence our sages tell us, happy the righteous and happy his neighbors. So this is also from Maimonides. It is natural to be influenced by the friends around you, by the congregants around you, by the employees around you, by the people around you. And we've also been warned when there is a mob or a crowd to isolate yourself from them. So our sages said, make for yourself a mentor and acquire for yourself a friend. You know, even your best friend, or Marion, in your case, your sister, is a mentor because she encourages you to do better. So anyone who encourages you to do better, to be more than you are, to realize your potential, is indeed the right people to choose to have around you. And this is what Hashem did for Moses to end his depression and his wish to die. And many of our great prophets, Joshua also said to God, why don't you kill me? It's no point in living. You've given the people a second chance. So we in the Jewish religion understand that our Torah is a very practical example of life. It doesn't give us people to follow, be they Moses, Joshua, Jacob, David, all these people who are not like you and me. It allows us to aspire to overcome our depression, our loss, our fear, our lack of self-confidence, our selling ourselves short, to realize our potential. But most of all, it binds us one to the other, to our great nation, to understand the differences, to respect the differences between the streams of Judaism, and ultimately it must bind us to humanity as a whole. And I just want to conclude now with what Rabbi Zolzavechik, he wrote an essay based on this parasha called The Lonely Man of Faith. And in it he writes words which I'm sure you and I have felt at times. I am lonely. I'm lonely because at times I feel rejected and thrust away by everybody, even including intimate friends. And I remember the words of the psalmist. This is Rabbi Zoloveitchik. My father and my mother have forsaken me, ring quite often in my ears, like the plaintive cooing of a turtle dove. This is extraordinary. At this time of loneliness, which we're all experiencing, due to the pandemic, due to the loss of jobs, due to the loss of a loved one, just due to fear of the future, that itself creates a terrible loneliness. I trust you, like Moses, can hear the words of Hashem. This too shall pass. And God has assured us, and the whole of Torah or Tanakh teaches us, we will never be alone. And God didn't actually change things for Moses, but he made sure that he knew he was not alone, that God was with him, and that the other 70 people that he called around him were with him, and then they did something practical. I've always said, to end on a very light note, that in my business or to people who were working with me when things were really down and they didn't know what to do, just put out your hand, pick up that phone and phone anyone you know who loves you, any gesture you think that might get you further towards getting some work in. Just do something. So perhaps when we are alone, that is when we reach for our Torah and reach for the understanding that Hashem is always with us and with the friends we choose around us that will guide us to a better tomorrow. Shabbat Shalom.